In this video, I'll be sharing with you a requested tutorial from my group on how to cut this stylish Agbada Bubu dress with a pleat at the front part. So to start for this pattern, you're going to cut your pattern on fold and together, right? So let's say I folded my fabric into two, then you're going to fold it again this way. That means when you're cutting it, you're going to fold your fabric on fold. Just like when you're folding your cut together dress, you're going to place it on fold this way and then you now fold it again. So since this is a tutorial, I'll be working on only one side of this dress. So that's why I'm just folding it in form of half, like one single part, just like you're cutting your dress. Now when you're folding your pattern, get the full length of your dress. Now let's say here to here is the full length of your dress. Now another thing is when you're folding this, the front part of your dress will be longer than that of the back. Why? You're adding an extension to the lower part to accommodate you create that pleat we have in front. Now I'll notch the center. Please remember when you're folding this on your actual fabric, please fold it on fold and not in a single manner this way. This is because this is just a tutorial and I'm just working on one side of this dress. Now just like I said, this is the back pattern of this dress. Now the longer side is the front pattern. You're going to get the full length of your dress and you're going to add an extension like 20 to 30 inches depending on the pleat you want to fold at the upper part of this dress. Now you're going to mark your shoulder divided by 2 and add 1 inch to your shoulder measurement, because this is more like an Agbada dress and is not supposed to be fitted at the shoulder. Next, I'll mark an extension of 6 inches. Now this 6 inches I'm marking is for that pleat at the shoulder. I'm using 6 inches so that by the time I fold it, I'll have like 3 inches, because you know you're going to pleat it and stitch on it, right? So if you use 4 inches, if you pleat it out, you will have 2 inches when you're sewing. Now from this point, you will measure your sleeve length. Now when you're measuring this sleeve length, remember at the sleeve of this dress, there's a pleat. That means after measuring the actual sleeve length, you're going to add an extension to it. That extension is for pleating or creating pleats on the sleeve part of this dress. Now from here, you're going to go ahead to measure all the way down depending on how big or wide you want your sleeve to be. So you can use around 12 inches, 10 to 15 inches for your sleeve. This totally depends on how open or wide you want it to be. Then go ahead to draw out a line there. Now what I'll do now is from this part, I'll place my tape and mark my shoulder to bust. Then go ahead to mark my shoulder to waistline. Then after that, I'll measure 7 inches to mark my hip point. So note, I'm not using my actual measurement because this dress is very big. If I mark that, it might be too difficult for me to illustrate it on this pattern paper and it might turn out confusing. So that is why I'm doing it on a smaller size. So now what I'll do is to go ahead to draw out the line for the bust, waist, and also mark out the hip line. So I'll just go ahead to label this. After I'm done labeling it, we'll now go ahead to add our measurements to this pattern. Now I'm going to go ahead to mark my bust circumference divided by 4 and I'll add extra 4 inches to this measurement. Now another easy way to cut this dress is to cut the back separately and cut the front separately. But looking at the shoulder of this dress, there's no joining on it. So I'll start inserting my measurement. Normally when you're making this Agbada dress, you can go ahead to add up to like 6 inches. But if you look at this dress, Bubu Agbada dress, it is not way too big, so 4 inches is okay. So I'll also mark the waist circumference divided by 4, add 4 inches, mark the hip circumference divided by 4 and add 4 inches. Now I'll go ahead to connect. So if you feel this 4 inches is not enough for your Bubu dress or Agbada dress, you can go ahead to increase it by 6. But just like I said, this particular pattern is not too big, unlike the normal or regular Bubu dress. And if you look closely, it followed the shape of the body. So all I'll do is just to go ahead to connect my pattern. Now, while I'm connecting, I'm just connecting the back alone. I'll connect the front later. This is because we are going to add an extension to the front part of this dress so that we can go ahead to create the pleat on it. Now, while connecting this all the way down, when I get to my hip point, I'll go down a bit, and then towards the lower part, I'll go out a bit. This is to create this slight A-line effect we have on the dress, right? So after I'm done marking that, I'll mark the neckline. So for the neckline, you can use 3.5 inches. I just marked 3 inches because of I'm using a shorter pattern paper. And for the depth, come down by 1 inch or 1.5 and go ahead to connect this down. Connect it to the upper part of this dress. Now, after you're done connecting, so I'll go ahead to make this mark to the other side, which is the front part of this dress, right? So that I'll know where to like pleat it. So after this, I'll go ahead to cut this part. So after I'm done cutting, I'll stop towards the waistline of this dress. What I'll now do is I'll lift up this pattern paper and cut only the one going to the back of the dress, right? So after I'm done cutting that, you notice I left the front. Now we added an extension, and that extension you added, you're going to create a space where you're going to pleat it. So what I'll do is I'll mark out my waistline on my dress. I'll place the tape and I'll measure from that hip point all the way to the lower part what I have. So what I'm going to do is I'll go down to that extension I marked and mark exactly that measurement there. Now that means the remaining part of the upper part, I will pleat it out on the dress. Now after marking that, what I'll now do is to go ahead to measure what I have on the hip, and I'll go ahead to mark it on this dress. Now I'll be blending it out also. So I'm going to place starting from my waist, from my hip to that point, to make sure what I have there aligns, and this is what I have. So this splitting started gradually from the waist towards the hip, like a bit lower towards the hip, right? So that is why I'm making emphasis on the hip, and I'll go ahead to connect this. Now if you don't want to mark this way, all you have to do is cut the shoulder, cut the front separate, cut the back separate, join it back at the shoulder. The only thing is that when you're cutting the front, you still go ahead to add an extension to it, which you're going to use to make or create that pleating on the dress. So for your extension, you can use about 20 inches, 10-20 inches or more, because you're trying to like create that pleat at that center. So I'll notch the neckline, the shoulder point there, and what I'll do now is I'll go ahead to the front neckline, and I'm going to come down at least by 3 inches. Then I'm going to go ahead to go down to create that center curve. That is a round and V neckline, but this round and V neckline is not so roundish. So this V neckline here will make it easy for your dress to accommodate your head, like when you're putting on the dress, because of the neckline, the depth of this neckline. Or if not, you can add a zipper at the back of the dress, but I didn't get to see a zipper at the back of the dress. So this is what I have now. Now you're going to take note of that point, that is your waist point. You will mark it on the front waist. Now also the hip, you're going to take note of that also, because you're going to go ahead to pleat it now. That is this line we marked at the lower part. That is where your hip now will be, right? Because whatever we have in between that waist and that line, we are going to pleat it all the way up so that the lower part will now meet up. So now what I will do is from that waistline now, I'll start pleating. So you can pleat depending on how deep you want the pleat to be. So I'll pleat the first one, pleat the second one, and I'll continue pinning or pleating till I get to where I made that point at the lower part. So if you have any questions so far, please go ahead to ask, right? So just like I said, if you find this difficult cutting it together as a cut together dress because there's no slit at the shoulder, please cut the front separately and also cut the back separately and join. So now after I'm done pleating, I've pleated out that extension I have. If you notice, the lower part is now matching the upper part of this pattern. Now you want to go ahead to turn to the other side to take note of the part that is not meeting. Go ahead to trace it out, right? Just like I said, I'm working on one side of this dress, but if you're cutting it on, if you're cutting yours on your fabric, you're going to cut it on fold. So after doing this, you're going to cut out a strap of fabric where you're going to place this way, and then you will drag it up a little. This is to create, like what you're going to cut out here, you turn it first and then place it. Then when you stitch on it, you drag it up. If you notice at the center of this dress, it's as if that pleated part at the center went up. So you drag it up and then place it at the center and top stitch. So by the side now, you go ahead to use your pin to hold your pleat, and then you can go ahead to top stitch on it, like to hold it down, so that when you're shaping the front and the back, it will now match up, right? So when you're pleating the front, this part that has a pleat, you can use the back pattern to serve as a guide so that you know what you're pinning exactly. So I'll just use my small tape to just hold it down so that the pleat will not shift. Now let's move right over to the shoulder of this dress. Remember that mark we marked, that's 6 inches now. You're going to find the midpoint, like pick that line, make sure it's matching. Now you're going to stitch on it to create that agbada effect at the shoulder. Note, whatever you're stitching will not get all the way down to this dress. It's just to stitch it a little on top so that your dress will have this agbada feel at the upper part of the dress. If you look at this dress in particular, you notice that the stitching was just at the upper part of this dress to give that agbada effect at the shoulder. So the stitching will not really go down, just between the upper part of the shoulder or towards the chest line. Before we go over to stitching the side of this dress, right, I'll just make this mark to indicate that you're going to stitch this, right? You're not stitching it down on the sleeve. Oh. You're going to separate it this way and stitch so that the sleeve can be on its own altogether. It will just, when you stitch it, it will just stand on its own. So after that, you just fold it back. Now when you now fold it back, you notice the sleeve of this dress has like little pleats, right? Now this is why I said when you're cutting the sleeve of your dress, you're going to add an extension to it, right? So what you're going to do is to go ahead to open it back, and then you now go ahead to pleat this, right? Pleat it, and you're now going to stitch it at the center of your dress. You can create the pleat according to how it was done on the dress, or you can go ahead to do your own design, right? Whatever you have on the sleeve, after marking your sleeve length, please add an extension. You can add up to like 10 to 15 inches, split it out. Now if cutting this dress on fold this way will be a problem or difficult for you, go ahead to cut out the back first. Then after cutting the back, you now go ahead to cut out the front. You now use the front pattern to cut the back. So after cutting it, you can now go ahead to pleat it, then join the front to the back. you're going to still achieve the same result. If working on your fabric directly this way without having a stitch at the shoulder will be difficult. So this is what I have after drafting.